We've talked so much about the emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, and I think conflict is a great representation of how, generally speaking, many people aren't in a place to truly understand how they feel. In a world that often pulls us apart, More in Common brings us back to what matters. Hosted by Gerren Taylor and Keith Richardson, this isn't your average podcast. It's a challenge to think deeper, question louder, and grow further. At More in Common, we work with NFL teams, tech companies, and professionals across industries to improve communication and foster compassion. And with a focus on emotional intelligence, we aim to bring a wealth of experience to help you navigate the complexities of human connection. We've never been more connected and yet more isolated. We want to explore the roots of that tension and offer a way back to what we all need: real human connection. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the More in Common podcast.
Rude. Just kidding.
I stole it. This is Keith Richardson, and that's Gerren Taylor. How about that? Stealing some thunder, mixing it up.
Well done, sir.
Let's create some dissonance in listeners' like creating dissonance for you. Just throwing. So an interesting thing that I learned about you the other day, and I think this is the reason why I want this to be a topic of conversation, is that in elementary school, and I just learned this about you the other day, in elementary school, you were a conflict mediator in the school. First of all, you got to let us know what that means.
This was a very interesting program. I swear I had a very strange upbringing in the 90s in the Bay Area. But this is a elementary school in Oakland, and basically as a way to kind of reduce playground fights, they enlisted certain students to become conflict managers. And we had, shirts and clipboards, and whenever there was a situation,
hall monitor type action, I'm having a visual.
A little bit,
the yellow,
but not that level. Similar but different. So we would get students who were experiencing conflict, and we would establish some ground rules and walk them through conflict mediation strategies as 10-year-olds. I have no idea who thought this was a great idea, but honestly, it did work. I mean, it did help a lot to reduce stupid playground fights over nothing. But it also instilled in me some pretty interesting tools about how to resolve conflicts. I mean, conflict's unavoidable; it's gonna happen. So,
dude, I think that is just an outstanding. It's unfortunate that everybody in the school didn't go through conflict mediation training, but only a few were selected to be the mediators, right? There's something there. But at that age, learning conflict is okay. I think this is one of the areas that I'm very adamant in my household with my family is look, mom and dad get in arguments. We're going to get in arguments with each other, with the kids. What are we doing to resolve it and navigate it so that our kids don't have a fear of conflict? Right. And then they can learn to navigate it. What did you learn? What did you learn then that continues to influence you today?
Oh, I love that question. I think it's exactly what you were saying, that conflict isn't inherently bad, that it's going to occur. But the key is to make sure it doesn't escalate, that you find ways to resolve it before it escalates to, combat or whatever, you know what I mean? Something worse. And then it also, I think, helps one identify and realize the sources of conflict, especially interpersonally. Unmet needs, value clashes, unclear boundaries is a big one, because You took my thing, especially like as a kid, right? But it's still to this day, it's like you ate that last piece of pizza that I wanted, or something like that can cause conflict, right? And so, like, how do you manage that, especially in a house with lots of people? Um, so I do think that again, being lucky enough to kind of be able to practice these things at a younger age allows you to look at them differently later on in life, just from the years of being able to do it over and over again, the muscle memory. Um, and trying in some ways, you know, I think to use a lot of those tools, which we'll talk about later on, in my own interpersonal relationships, or even teach them to in relationships to people, because I have to, you know what I mean? I approach my own conflicts differently now. I can't do crazy yelly screaming matches, right? Like, I can't let it escalate like that. It just doesn't work for me. So I have to make sure that my partner has the same tools in order to communicate. Otherwise, it ain't gonna work out.
So it's such a great, dude. I mean, conflict arises all the time, right?
Yeah, totally.
And, we often talk about two areas, either in political conversations or even in the workplace, right? Where conflicting ideas create, where do you generally start, whether you're navigating your own conflict or you're helping somebody else with conflict?
Well, I guess it depends on the situation. Usually, we with myself, or if I'm like on a one-to-one with a friend, we try to identify the triggers, like what's actually the root of this for me, like what's making me feel this reaction, and then approaching that. At some point there needs to be the resolution, the coming together of everybody, and how you approach that. So encouraging people to kind of set ground rules in those conversations, which is one of the things we definitely did as conflict managers, right? Like, you have to set that, and keep everybody informed of what the ground rules are. So, like, no personal attacks, you know what I mean? Trying to use I statements instead of you statements, like, you do this and it makes me feel this way. Is, I feel like this when XYZ occurs, or when you do that thing, right? But it can still be something that somebody does. And the Lara method. So it's very important in how we were doing the structure, the order. So one person would talk, you actively listen to what they're saying. Then in your response, you are to affirm what you've heard, and like kind of like say it back to them. So if I'm understanding you right, this I can see how that, you know, understand, you respond with your clarity, and then add how you saw the situation and how you feel to it. So really the mechanisms come down to the same things that we talk about so often on this show: meeting people where they're at, being open to listening, removing the assumptions, embracing with curiosity, uh, so that you can kind of self-regulate through the conflict. But I do heavy encourage people to practice using I statements when having these, because it really does affect how someone receives what you're saying, right? So when you're like, you do this and you do that,
Mhm.
people shut down.
Shut
And
it
it
down.
and
You're
it
attacking
becomes,
them, right? You just
yeah,
put them right into a defensive posture,
the
for
only
sure.
thing they're thinking about now is how to strike back, right? Like, how they're
That's
going
right.
to get back at you for your the attack. And
That's right.
so it's a great way to shut down a conversation by using these blame statements, instead of using I statements, because like you said, it really is about you at the end of the day.
Right.
What need or value or clash is occurring for you? That person may not even be aware, that they offended you in some way, or what they said didn't connect in the way that they were trying to intend it. So it's really about being able to self-regulate, pause, think before you react. But the listening tools, the using the I statements, really helps you navigate that conversation in a much different way. Is this all new stuff? This is not new stuff for you. This is all stuff that you've done before as well, right?
Yeah, for me, for sure. But, like we're talking about conflict, right? Like things are triggered,
Yeah.
things are heightened. We are actively in a disagreement, right? Like that's the conflict. It's triggered emotions have been spiked, and now we are both in some sort of fight or argument. It's
Right.
not pre-argument. It's like we are there. I think one of the things that you talk about in that is the understanding how we feel, right? Like we've talked so much about the emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, and I think conflict is a great representation of how, generally speaking, many people aren't in a place to truly understand how they feel, especially in Western society. Have you ever read the book Crucial Conversations?
No, I don't know that one.
It's a great book. And one of the things that they talk about in navigating critical and crucial conversations, which tend to be high stakes conversations, right? Like that's what we're talking about, high stakes conversations. When conflict arises, whether or not it's over a piece of pizza or over who gets custody of the kids, like when our angers, our frustrations, like when we're on the anger spectrum or we are spiked in some sort of negative emotional experience, that makes it high stakes for us in that moment, right? Like we're going to throw the word out there, survival. We are in a defensive posture. We are feeling threatened in some way. And we often use language. So, this is what Crucial Conversation says, that isn't clear. So, like you
Mm,
were saying, you make me feel is often a thing. You made me feel. And as soon as you say you make me, right, it's like, wait a second. And we talk to our kids all the time because they do that, right? It's like, first of all, the other person is not responsible for your emotional experience, right? Like what they did might have caused you to have this experience, but they aren't responsible for it. And then what Crucial Conversations will say is you have to state the actual feeling. More often than not, we see things like, you make me feel like an idiot. Like an idiot is not a feeling,
right.
right?
Right. Right.
Right? Feeling like an idiot is a response to something else. What we want to reframe it, to your point, is when you said that, I felt shame, right? Name the
Yeah.
emotion, because the way I interpret that has me thinking that I am an idiot, right? It's being very clear in that structure. So we're defining the emotions that we have versus, because we're not going to be able to reconcile our own conflict in this situation if we're trying to reconcile this other person making us feel like an idiot, right? What we need to get to is the root is, okay, the words that were said made me frustrated. They made me
Yeah.
angry. And here's
Right.
why. Now, you might not know why, but being able to at least stop is like, and say, it made me frustrated and I'm not sure why, changes the entire posture of how you're in that conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really what it's all about, is changing the posture, right? Because like we were saying, the conflict is inevitable, but the combat is optional. That's actually a Max Lucado quote that I just like dropped in there on you.
Oh,
And you can see that coming.
conflict is
Oh, no.
inevitable. Wait, what was it again?
Combat.
Conflict is inevitable. Combat
Combat is
is
optional.
optional.
Is optional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's making
Yeah.
choices.
Uh,
But no, it's
who quoted that?
it's
I
from
didn't hear. Who was that?
Max Lucado. Max Lucado.
Oh man,
Yeah, be like,
that's
you're like,
brilliant.
still,
I love that.
that did nothing for you.
That's so good. Yeah, that's so good.
No, but and so
I just wanted to make sure
in
I heard you.
different
You brushed
contexts
past that
though,
way too. You were like, yeah, 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 yeah. No, that was
I was
good.
it was a casual drop. I wasn't trying to like
Yeah, that was
highlight it.
it
It was
was
just
too good. I couldn't
it
let that
was
be
a
too
sprinkle.
casual. Yeah, that was too casual. So how do you here's a
But in different
question for
contexts.
you,
Yeah,
because
go
this
ahead.
like
All right.
yeah, this goes back to the first conversation we had about setting boundaries. Like the lore, like how do you get like if you're helping other people navigate conflict, how do you get them to define what you need to accomplish? Like what are we trying to resolve here? Like how do you get them to be on the same page about that?
Well, literally in the program, you had to agree to the ground rules in order to participate. So the things we were talking about earlier, like not using I statements, not accusing, being focused on listening, doing the repeating, and having the goal of actually coming to a resolution. There's ground rules that you kind of agree to before you start, and I think that's the same thing that we often talk about on this show and getting to some of these tougher conversations is establishing early on, what the parameters kind of are, so that you can go into it in a way of approaching uh, the resolution as the main goal, so to speak, right? So that you have these boundaries about how you're going to communicate to each other within this resolution term, so that you can work on the goal of solving it and not escalating it, and managing those expectations as well. uh, Super takes practice, as we always say, but it's super
Oh, so
important.
much practice. No, I think
I
I
actually
think
kind of
that
find it fun, to be
element
honest with you.
of dude resolving. Yeah, I think that element of like we see a conflict here, like getting like defining like okay, do you agree we are here to resolve this? Right? Now that's if you're talking, but if you're in it, like hey, this needs to be resolved. This is our end goal. And then we start the journey of getting there. But if the other person says, no, that's not what I want to accomplish here, it's like, oh, okay. Like that needs to be agreed upon before you can do anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise,
I mean, definitely.
you're just,
So like
go ahead.
in the school, we had like the carrot and the stick approach, right? It was like you can go to conflict mediation, or you could have the normal discipline that you would encounter in a school. So there is that dynamic,
That's it. Yeah.
that helps, and which is why the different contexts require us to be nimble, require us to navigate differently how we approach these things. That doesn't work at home necessarily, or at work. um, but having a healthy practice in it allows you to engage in it, and you don't need necessarily a third person to mediate if you are both committed to finding the solution.
Yeah. I think one of the things you also said in there is removing personal attacks. It's such a common thing now. Or I'd say I don't know if it's more common now than it ever was before because it's rooted in, you know, how we understand socially, especially in Western society, to navigate conflict, or I should say in America, not just Western society. And that element of how easy it is to go to a personal attack because I don't know what to
Yeah.
say. I don't know how to, it's just easier to jump to that. Or even, yeah, are you familiar with the straw man argument?
Yeah.
Yeah. So straw man argument is when for those, like when you eh, boil it down to some unrelated point to seemingly make your point, even though it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Right. I was watching this online discussion between a very adamant anti-Trumper and a very adamant Trump supporter, like opposite ends of the spectrum. And the anti-Trumper was talking about how um, they were talking about the mandate element, right? Like, oh, there was a mandate when he won, and he's like, no, the majority of Americans did not vote for him. It was a majority of those who showed up at the polls, right? Like that was the argument.
Mhm.
To which the pro Trump supporter said, yeah, just like 2020. It's like, okay, 2020 has nothing to do with the argument that was being made, right? And quite
Right.
honestly, the conflict that they're discussing was over regulation management in the financial sector, right? That was the thread in Facebook, and that's where it ended up going to. Like, what that's not an honest discussion. And of course, this is online, so we're not having how it's not super productive in most circumstances. But that, like, we need to avoid that, or if it's done, we need to understand it and how do we address it, right? It's like, wait a second, well, can we stay
Mm.
focused on what's being discussed? Like, we are going off the rails. We set the agreement on what we're trying to resolve. Can we not introduce new conflict that's only going to take us further away from the resolution that we're trying to accomplish here, right?
Yeah. I was really wishing that I had the old, but of course, it's not like
The
today's
old,
age where everything's digital. And yeah, the old. I wish I had the
yeah,
sheet
yeah.
on
You
so
have
I could
some
read to you
workbook
verbatim.
somewhere at your parents' house.
I
Yeah,
might. I might. I gotta call my mom
yeah,
after this to see if I can find something
yeah.
that's related to this, because it's just such a cool connection back to the history of my upbringing. But to your point, those are very important. The ground rules are very important about how you approach the conversation in conflict resolution, including that not bringing up the old, the other things that are outside of the particular conflict that we're trying to resolve um, right now. But it
It's like,
also,
you took
even
my
having that,
lunchbox. Yeah, but you knocked over my bike 6 weeks ago. Like, right?
right.
Like, wait a second. We're trying
I
to
can't tell you how
resolve the
many
lunchbox issue. Like,
kickball related mediations we had
conflicts
to
there
do
were. I'm sure there
from
were.
like,
I'm sure.
but
I'm sure. No, I think what's
interpersonally,
interesting about this oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I have this, and I'll bring it up after. But I want to hear what you were going to say. What's interesting about this conversation to you?
No, I was just gonna say, I think what's interesting about this conversation is that, like, conflict resolution isn't new, right? And it's not, um, and there's stuff out there, methods you learn them when you were in fourth grade, right? Like, it was 30 plus years ago, and there was stuff before that that still hold true to this day. And
Oh
the
yeah,
reality is, I think it comes back to, conflict is uncomfortable, but if we can find more comfort in its existence, we could probably navigate them versus avoid them. Because generally speaking, what are we trying to do in conflict? Get out of the conflict. We're not trying to resolve it. We're just trying to
absolutely.
get out of it. Right.
Right, right.
Now, what were you going to say?
And that's a well, it was because of the evolution in this thing. So I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that. One of my friends introduced me, shout out Megan, to the Gottman Institute's Four Horsemen of Conflict. This is what so I don't know if you know what the Gottman Institute is, but they do also a lot of relationship.
I've heard of the
Um,
Gottman Institute. Yeah.
yeah. So, but the four horsemen of conflict discussion was criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, which I thought was a very interesting discussion. And I bring it up because these are the kind of pitfalls or the names that have been given to the pitfalls nowadays of to some of the things that we've been mentioning, like criticism versus complaining. Right, criticizing is that deeper kind of attack on their core, their character, as opposed to like a complaint about a specific action, or like holding them in contempt when especially when people feel like they're putting in more effort than another in different parts of a relationship. um totally being defensive about how we, you know when we feel unjustly accused or there's a misunderstanding about who was supposed to do stuff, And then of course the classic, the stonewalling, where I'm just not talking to you at all, which is
I'm just not
obviously
interested. Yeah.
problematic for resolving any sort of conflict. So I bring that up though because it is a very interesting how the thought around this has evolved, and how much more reading and tools people have to not just identify when they're in these conflicts, or what may be the source of these conflicts, but what to do when you're there, like the repair and reconnection. Keith, do you know how to apologize?
Oh, yeah.
What's
I am
the
I'm not an
what's the
apologizer, but I am okay apologizing. You know who isn't? And
oh,
sorry, honey, but my wife, not an
oh
apologizer. Takes me a
darn,
long time
you're gonna
to get
cause a
her to
conflict.
apologize. Yeah. Calling it out.
You're gonna
We talk about it all the
I'm
time.
gonna
Talk about it
I'm
all
gonna
the time.
tag her in the social clip. No, I'm just kidding. what's what's the anatomy of a good apology, Keith?
The anatomy, like, for me, it's first understanding, and I don't know where you're coming from, but first it's like accepting that I did something that wasn't in line with the collective expectation, whether that's our in-house expectations or whatever, or something that um, caused some sort of distress towards, we'll say, my wife in this particular case. And it was an action that I could have done better. And there is a better way for me to approach it, or a way that I would have preferred to approach it. So it's understanding that inside myself. And then it's
Uh-huh.
simply just, is sincerely saying, hey, I am sorry for doing that thing, not I am sorry you felt that way.
Right. I mean, there you go. I mean, you nailed it. Because a lot of people apologize for in that way of saying I'm sorry you felt that way, and not accepting that they're responsible for their own behavior that may have caused that, um, and then offering repair or forgiveness, or like the way you said it, like there are ways that maybe I could have done that better, like being open to that. um, Change is part of a real apology. And so that's also what we would do in this program is we would ask, what do you need to resolve this conflict? And I think it's such a powerful question, and I definitely use it often, because sometimes people don't even know, and forcing them to think
That's
about
the
it is
truth.
such a key step to it. But sometimes people are mad to be mad, and
Yeah.
or they're something else is triggering them, and they're allowing that trigger to be mad at you in this moment, right? um but the actual asking of what do you need to resolve this conflict, and forcing that thought process to occur, is very powerful. And then, of course, sometimes that's an apology, a real apology. Sometimes that is actual, repair of some sort of damage or something that was done. Um, but it is such an important tool to practice uh, as part of conflict resolution when everybody's on board with actually resolving the conflict.
When everybody's on board with actually resolving. Look, I think I think there are two things there are a lot of different ways that have been documented, that continue to be documented, to navigate conflict. And the reason is conflict is inevitable, combat is optional. God, I love that quote, right? Like, we have zero way of avoiding conflict in our lives. We can minimize it, we can reduce it, but at some point we do need to navigate it. So avoiding it is just not possible. So finding ways to prevent combat and manage it is just, I think, such an important thing for us to just promote as the
Yeah.
mechanisms that do exist and talk about it, because it's so critical. So I love this conversation. I love that you had that experience. I think that's just so wonderful, and I only wish more of that existed. And I think this
But to
has
your
been a
point about
killer
not being able to
conversation.
avoid conflict, like a lot of people do think avoiding these situations helps them maintain the peace, but really no. Eventually, that's going to destroy your relationships, right? Or
An
that like
elephant in the
really
room
being
is
in
not
love means that
seen,
you never
right?
have, right? Or being in love means that you don't have strife. Oh, me and my partner never fight. Oh, we don't conflict. Like that's probably not good either, because you're probably avoiding something if you're never ever having any conflict ever. Or that compromise means that you're losing. Like life is compromise. This is why I think it's so important to talk about uh real apologies as part of this, because sometimes people do believe that they can kind of get away with those like half apologies, and that does like end up just being an avoidance tactic that brings it back up later because it was never really resolved.
Like resent is a real thing, and it builds up. And I mean, we're all about communication, and sometimes communication is conflict. It's not always,
Yeah.
but sometimes it is. And it's just healthier if we actively work towards improving conflict versus promoting it in a way that is combative. Let's
Yeah.
manage the I love that.
Yeah, accepting it.
Yeah, accepting it. Well,
Are you
look,
gonna
this has
tattoo
been
it? Are you
awesome.
gonna tattoo it on your body?
Oh, what a
You
good
should tattoo
tattoo.
that quote. No,
Oh, I've been, yeah, I'd have to source it. But look, if you like the episode, let's promote it. Let's leave a comment. A comment would be really, really helpful. Tell us what you want to hear us talk about. Like some of these conversations have come from some recommendations that we get in personal discussion. And,
totally.
like
or
it,
share it with somebody
subscribe,
that you've had a good disagreement with.
and you want to start to manage conflict.
See? You write in the comments, you can be like, Susan, we need to talk about no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Just send a text. We need to talk. Watch this.
Right. Watch this.
All right.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Gerren Taylor, and I'm Keith Richardson. Hey, this is the More in Common podcast, and we are out.
Have fun.